Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of the Rum Society podcast. This is episode 0. A lot of my co-hosts, they are having technical issues, or we just wanted to see how the setup looks, the Streamlabs overlay. So this is more of just a test stream, and I'm going to read a few parts out of my book, Haunted Places of Europe, just to keep you guys entertained. Mostly just to test out the Streamlabs, test out the audio quality. This is all very new to me, so I just wanted to see how it goes. Also, the slideshow will get changed to something a little more spooky and not just be my vacation photos. So, let's dive right in. These places that I'm going to be talking about out of this book, they're all places that I've been to. My book is called Haunted Places of Europe. It's available on Amazon. So I'm just going to read about a few of the places that I went to that I particularly enjoyed. Maybe talk about them, and if anyone shows up to the chat, then talk to you guys as well. So first off is 2 places out of the Czech Republic. Czech Republic is one of my favorite countries that I've ever been to, and if you ever get the opportunity to go, it is absolutely lovely. I do know a easier way to get there to save you a couple $100, so if you're interested in going, let me know. So yeah, first up, the Hauske Castle. Any of my routine viewers might have seen my video on this. All of these places I have made videos on, and some of the video quality I'm not really too happy with, as my editing skills have gotten better over time, and the hardware that I use has gotten better over time. But yeah, so you might have seen some of these, but this is a little bit of new information than what's been in my previous videos. So we'll start here. The Hauske Castle is probably the most mystifying castle in Europe. Visually, the Hauske Castle is not very attractive, but its outward appearance is just the beginning of the oddity that is the Hauske Castle. Most castles have 2 major features: fortifications for protection and an advantageous location. The Hauske Castle has neither. Fortifications on castles are usually used to keep out invaders, but the Hauske Castle is designed to strictly keep things in. The Hauske Castle is also in an out-of-the-way location, far from any trade routes. During the time of construction, building the Hauske Castle was a massive undertaking for seemingly low reward. The mystery deepens when you begin to ponder what exactly the Hauske Castle was meant to retain within its walls. Prior to the construction of the Hauske Castle, this region of Bohemia was said to be besieged by nightmarish creatures, unholy abominations, and human and animal hybrids. These supernatural creatures terrorized the peasantry, destroyed their crops, and preyed upon their livestock. The source was found to be a hole with no visible bottom in the hills that the monsters were emerging from. At this point, King Ottokar II of Bohemia ordered the Hauske Castle to be built to contain the demonic infestation. When the Hauske Castle was finished, there were no wells for water, no kitchen, and no plans for human occupation at all. This castle was strictly a prison for inhuman entities. During the construction of the castle, there was an inmate who was condemned to die for his crimes, and the local lord offered him a pardon if he agreed to be lowered into the hole and report back what he had seen. Shortly after being lowered into the hole, the prisoner started screaming in a panic. Once the prisoner was raised from the hole, his hair had turned white, his face had become wrinkled, and he was said to have aged 30 years. He recounted seeing hell itself. The hole was promptly covered with the floor of the castle's chapel, where the walls are scrawled with Christian scripture, images, and incantations. Once the hole was covered, the demonic harassment of the peasantry in the region had ceased. Peace had finally returned to this section of Bohemia. The Hauske Castle had transferred into the hands of the local nobility throughout the years, and in the late 1500s, it had become a proper noble residence. Eventually, the Hauske Castle had gone unused and began to dilapidate. Renovations on the failing castle began in 1823, and in 1897 it was purchased by Prince Holeneho, who lived in the castle until it was bought by Josef Simonek, the president of the Škoda region. During the occupation of Czechoslovakia by the Nazis, the Hauska Castle was annexed and used by Germans to conduct abhorrent experiments on the local prisoners, or on the locals, as well as the prisoners of war. There is no doubt that the Hauska Castle is a frightening location filled with a terrible history. However, this history is what makes it an interesting location for the adventurous traveler. Getting to the Hauska Castle can be a difficult task since there's a lack of public transportation to the region. The easiest way to get to the Hauska Castle is to hire a car and drive yourself, or ride a bicycle there like I did. It can be made into a day trip if you only have a car, since it's only 30 or so miles north of Prague. Cell service is spotty near the castle, but there is appropriate signage guiding you to the castle. Don't get caught near the castle after dark, as there are still reports of monsters on the prowl once the sun finally sets. So, I had a very, very lovely time at the Hauska Castle. There are a few different little restaurants around there. There's a bar, and it's a lovely place. Everyone there is super friendly. I was having a bit of, since I rode a bicycle there from Prague, I was having a bit of a hard time finding out where it was, but I found some other random guy who was a cyclist, and he asked me where I was going, and I was pronouncing it wrong. I was saying the Hauska Castle, and he's like, "Oh, Hauska?" I said, "Yeah, Hauska." And he's like, "Oh, okay, me and my friends were going to a pub very close by. You can follow me." And I followed him for a significant period of time until we got pretty close there, and I stopped and I bought those guys a beer, which in the Czech Republic it's wonderful because a beer outside of Prague is maybe 80 cents a pint, so you can buy a whole round for $5, no problem. And it was lovely. I had a very good time there. The people that work there, they put on a very good show, and it's well worth the time if you can get out there. Although it can be, like I said, it can be difficult to find, but it's a very, very interesting place. The main thing that I was bummed about, and something that I get in the comment sections a lot, is people are like, "Well, where's the hole? How come I can't see down the hole?" I was like, and that was something that I was expecting at first. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get there. You know, I've got a whole roll of paracord. I'm gonna tie a GoPro to it. I'm gonna lower that GoPro down in that hole." And I should have known, like, obviously, the hole was gonna be covered, and that's what I wrote about in the book. The hole is covered with the floor of the chapel, so you can't really see anything. And I was a bit bummed, and you know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, blah blah blah, why is there no hole?" And yeah, dude, it's a story, all right? It's a story. Just enjoy the tale, and just have fun with it. Obviously, if there was a real portal to hell that existed that had shit coming out of it, it would probably be major news everywhere. It's not just gonna be like, "Oh yeah, there's this little castle in the Czech Republic that blah blah blah." Like, no, that shit's gonna be on the news. If demons are coming out of a hole in the middle of Europe, that's gonna be on the news all the time. So I don't know why people have such overly high expectations for this, but hello, Miss Cooper. Lovely to see you in the chat. Glad to hear that everything is working well. So, up next is a church in the town of Kutná Hora, Czech Republic. Kutná Hora is a lovely little town. If you're ever in the region, getting from Prague to Kutná Hora, it's maybe a 20 minutes by train. It's really easy to get to. The town is lovely. Be a very wonderful place to spend a weekend. The hotels are cheap, food is amazing, and most of the streets are the old cobblestone streets, just like they were in the 1500s, 1400s when it was originally built. So it's absolutely lovely. But there is a church there, and this church is very unique, and it stands out, and it's rather odd. So this is the Sedlec Ossuary. The Sedlec Ossuary, or as it is colloquially known, the Bone Church, is a small Roman Catholic church located in the Sedlec suburb of Kutna Hora, Czech Republic. From the outside, the Sedlec ossuary is an unassuming Central European church. Once inside, the nature of this church radically transforms. As you enter the church, you are instantly greeted with a myriad of sculptures made of human bones. Walking down the stairs leads to a large main room where the sculptures get larger, more elaborate, and more grotesque. All of this leads a traveler to wonder why the people of Kutna Hora decided to put their dead on display in such a macabre house of worship. Well, in the latter part of the 1270s, the abbot of the monastery in Sedlec traveled to Jerusalem and returned with some soil that he had collected from the site of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. This soil was spread over the cemetery of the abbey, located where the Sedlec ossuary now sits. As word of this consecration spread, the cemetery became a very popular burial location for the faithful in Central Europe. The Hussite Wars were followed by the devastating Black Plague, which caused a massive influx in burials at the abbey's cemetery. In the early 15th century, a church was built to replace the abbey, and they decided the best place to build was in the center of the cemetery. The lower level of the new church was designated as a chapel/ossuary, and an ossuary is a room where bones are stored, for the large number of people who were exhumed from the mass graves during the construction of the church. Early in the 1500s, a nearly blind monk was tasked with sorting and stacking the skeletons and bones that were being exhumed. 3 years later, a famous Czech woodcarver was hired to turn the large bone heaps into something a little more pleasing to the eye, as pleasing to the eye as human bones can possibly get. Each corner of the ossuary had a large mound of bones with the skulls displayed on a ledge in front of the mounds. There's a chandelier of sorts in the center that supposedly has one of every bone in the human body. A cherub is located under the chandelier and is playing a trumpet while holding a skull. There's a display case of skulls of men who died of head wounds in the Hussite Wars. Injuries to these skulls are obvious, and there is even a crest of the family that hired the woodworker There's even a crest of the family that hired the woodworker made from the bones, and it is prominently displayed on one of the walls. This crest even features a raven picking imaginary flesh off the severed head of a Turkish soldier. With around 50,000 to 70,000 human skeletons on display in the Sedlec ossuary, it's not hard to imagine some of the spirits of the dead are still lingering here. Some of these old churches are spooky enough without thousands of skeletons staring directly into your soul. The macabre displays of the Sedlec ossuary are truly unique, and they are worth going to see. Kutna Hora is only a short train or bus ride from Prague, and Kutna Hora is arguably a better vacation destination than Prague. Many hostels and hotels in Prague have information on direct tours to the Sedlec ossuary, so there's little reason to not go see it. Try and listen, and when you go, maybe you'll hear the dead speak to you, saying, "Our bones are here, and for yours, we await." So something I should have changed in there. Do not go on a scheduled tour to this place. It is going to be shit. When I first went down there, I stayed in a hotel and just walked across the town to get there. And as I'm getting there, there's a giant tour bus that shows up with a bunch of most likely Chinese tourists, tons of people. And they all getting off at once. They're all going in. This place is not that big, so just being flooded with that many people wasn't worth it. There's several cafes nearby. So what I did was just kind of go to one of the cafes nearby, got a beer. I'm just sitting there with the beer, hanging out. And then once I saw these people get back in the bus and leave, then I went. And it was still relatively busy, but it wasn't just jam-packed. And if you're trying to get good photos or you're trying to get a video, you don't want people everywhere. And it's just odd. So just keep an eye out, maybe plan to stay a night there. I think the hotel I stayed in was $40 for the night, and yeah, it's lovely. So just catch a train down there. The train might cost you $5-10. Stay there. Keep an eye on the place while you're having a beer or maybe a meal, And then once you see that everything's kind of died down, then go up, take your tour, and it'll blow you away. Like, I knew what I was getting into because I knew what I was looking at. But once I actually got there and saw it all, it's like, wow, this is intense. Like, I don't know who thought this would be a good idea, but yeah, it's a very interesting place. So I can't wait to go to some other ossuaries in Europe and check those out, but it's definitely worth it. So another favorite of mine that is pretty close to the Czech Republic. It's in Slovakia. So from Prague to Bratislava, it's pretty easy to get there by bus or by train. It's not really worth the flight. It might be like a 45-minute flight. So just take a bus or a train. And then about an hour by train from Bratislava is the town of Katowice. It's in Slovakia. And Katowice is a tiny little Slovakian village. It's a nice town, but the only reason that you would ever really go there as a tourist would be to go to Hrad Katowice. Hrad meaning castle. So the Hrad Katowice is actually the castle that Elizabeth Bathory lived in. And if you're unfamiliar with who Elizabeth Bathory is, Elizabeth Bathory, as well as Vlad the Impaler, were the two European nobles that really inspired the majority of the vampire tales. They really brought it mainstream, and I mean they did some pretty insane things. So she is also known as the Blood Countess, or I've also heard her be called the Vampire Queen. It's a wild place, and this castle is definitely high on the creep factor. So let's dive in. Deep in the Slovakian countryside lies the ruins of a castle known as Hrad Katowice, or Katowice Castle. These ruins are a beautiful testament to the engineering prowess of the Moravians of the 13th century. The Katowice Castle was built on a hill that contains a vast number of rare plant species and is now considered a nature preserve of sorts by the Slovak government. These ruins are surrounded by a sea of trees and rocky hills, but there is a darker reality to this region. In 1575, the ownership of the Katowice Castle was transferred to its most notorious owner, the Hungarian Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory is known to most as the Blood Countess, and was one of the main progenitors of vampire legends. Oddly enough, she is related to the infamous Vlad Dracula, cementing his family's reputation of terror. Elizabeth Bathory was born in the Transylvania region of modern-day Romania, back then it was still Hungary, to a very distinguished lineage of nobles. But nobility is hardly correlated with morality. The legends say that Bathory was not only educated on being posh, but also educated in Satanism, black magic, and torture techniques. When Bathory and her husband moved to the Katowice Castle, she had a personal torture chamber built to her liking. This chamber still stands today, and it is absolutely terrifying. Elizabeth Bathory is the world record holder when it comes to the number of kills by a female serial killer, and the Katowice Castle was where her victims were slain. She didn't always kill for fun, or to satisfy some animal instinct. She mostly killed for vanity. Elizabeth Bathory thought that bathing in the blood of her young female victims would help her maintain a youthful appearance, and peasant girls were not in short supply. Bathory recruited these young women from the surrounding villages with the promise of jobs, lodging in the beautiful Katowice Castle, and teaching them to be proper ladies. What those women got instead was absolute horror. Peasant girls were abused and worked relentlessly until Bathory needed her quote-unquote beauty treatments. When that time came, the girls were hung upside down and had their throats slashed open and their blood drained into a tub. Bathing in the blood of these unfortunate women was just one aspect of Elizabeth Bathory's degeneracy, Her other guilty pleasures involve ramming objects under the nails of her victims, smearing girls with food and then tying them down outside to be ravaged by insects, and subjecting them to the rack, which is a infamous torture method. After the death of Elizabeth Bathory's husband, the little remaining shred of sanity that she had completely fell away. Bathory recruited her personal nurse and a local witch to help ratchet up the brutality. Her vampiric tendencies ramped up to the point that she was biting chunks off the servant girls, and even forced one girl to cook and eat her own flesh. Literal bloodbaths increased to the point where these women were abducting girls in the night and eventually murdered several daughters of the local nobility. An estimated 600 women met their end by the hands of Elizabeth Bathory, and this greed, plus the murdered noble daughters, would be her undoing. Families of the girls sent to Kachtytse Castle began to ask questions, as did the other nobles in the area. Where could so many peasant girls have gone, and why did Elizabeth Bathory continuously need more female servants? What was really going on at the Kachtytse Castle? King Matthias sent an envoy to the Kachtytse Castle to investigate the missing noble women, and they reportedly walked into an active torture session. She was literally caught red-handed. This was the final straw for the nobility above Elizabeth Bathory, and she had to be punished. Elizabeth Bathory, her nurse, and the witch were all tried for the murders of these girls within the walls of the Kachtytse Castle. Upon conviction, the nurse and witch were promptly executed, but Bathory's noble blood saved her from the gallows. Bathory was instead walled up in the Kachtytse Castle with only a small hole for air and food to be passed. She was there for 3 years, and at one point she complained to the guard that she was feeling cold. The guard left to retrieve a blanket, and when he returned, the Blood Countess was dead. National borders in this region of Europe have fluctuated significantly over the years, and that's why a Hungarian countess had a castle in modern-day Slovakia. The Kachtytse Castle, like I said before, is an easy trip from Bratislava. You just hop on a train from Bratislava, and the actual city that you want to go to is Visnove. It's Visnove, and not the actual city of Kachtytse. I mistakenly went to the city of Kachtytse, because I was figuring Kachtytse Castle, Kachtytse Town. Yeah, not quite. I ended up having to walk 6 miles to the castle and went up this little like wildlife path thing, and everything that I had read had said that the castle was abandoned, so I was thinking, oh cool, I'm gonna have this all to myself, it's gonna be whatever. It was really creepy walking through this tiny pathway up till I got up there, and then I eventually found a little like a dirt road big enough for a car to get on, which seemed odd, and I just kept going up, and I didn't see anybody, I didn't see any vehicles or anything like that, and right after I walked through, somebody said something to me in Slovak, and I jumped. Obviously, I was a little taken aback, and I just walked probably about 6 miles. So yeah, I was a bit taken aback at that, and turns out it isn't abandoned. You do have to pay, but I think it's like €2, so it wasn't very much. But yeah, you want to go to Visnove instead, because Visnove is really close to the castle. It's maybe 15 minutes on foot. The other thing though, Visnove is fucking terrifying. It is the scariest place I think I've been to. It is scarier than the castle, because once I walked down from the castle to try and find the train station, I also have this up on the channel. It's like Slovak Vampire Town or something like that. And I'm walking through, and there's no one around. There's no one. But it's the middle of the day. There's animals out, and there's no one around. All the houses, they look lived in, but no one's outside, no one's doing anything, and it's, noon. And all of a sudden these speakers come on, and the speakers start speaking in Slovak, which I didn't understand, and they sang all these messages, and I'm the only one around, and I'm just like, oh no, I'm gonna get I'm fixing to be bloodbathed next. It was rather terrifying, but yes, that would be the town that you need to go to, is Vishnove, because it's right there and it'd be a little bit easier. I was starting to freak out because when I was leaving, I was going down back towards Kachitse, and it was starting to get dark, and the last train was getting ready to go. Luckily, the Slovak guy picked me up because I started hitchhiking, and he wouldn't even let me pay him. I tried to pay him a little bit, but yeah, that was definitely an interesting one. Looking at the chat, wow, a lot of people actually showed up. Lovely to see you all. Yeah, I think JP might be a little more correct. The actual Slovak pronunciation is Kachitse. The CH in Kachitse is it's like that kind of sound. I've been taking Czech lessons for the last 2 years, so that's why I got good at saying these things. So the way JP is saying it is probably a lot closer to how it actually is said. Slovak and Czech are pretty much the same language. It's almost like the difference between American English and England English. So yeah, JP's probably saying it right. And hopefully I'm pronouncing these well, because I've been paying this woman for the last 2 years to learn the language, so hopefully I'm getting good at it. Alright, next we're going to go to 2 places in Romania, and then we'll wrap it up. Hopefully next week we can get some of the other issues sorted out. JP might be stopping by. Otherwise, Miss Cooper is going to be the co-host of the show if we can get some of that stuff worked out. So yeah, this is just episode 0, just testing out the display, the format, and I don't know if you guys were here for the earlier part of the stream. The slideshow is going to get more creepy and not just be vacation photos. It's going to be a little bit more polished up. So just a major test, and just reading some parts out of the book that I wrote. And if any of you want a copy of this, send me an email and I will send you out one. Okay, so the next one is it is not a recording, Coheed Consumer 13. This is actually live, and I really appreciate that it sounds professional. But I am reading out of a book, so it's not just me off the top of my head. So this next one is the execution site of Nicolae and Elena Ceausescu. It's a museum now, but it is probably like the creepiest museum I've ever been to. There's not even that much to it, and the video that I made about this is my most viewed video on my channel, which I'm actually kind of bummed about, because I made the video on an iPad in a tent in the middle of the woods in Romania, so the audio sounds like shit, and I'm unhappy with it. I want to go back and remake it, but this museum is like, you go to these other places that are explicitly haunted, or the Bone Church or something like that. They're very scary places. They're meant to be scary. But none of them were as unsettling as this little museum in the middle of Târgoviște, Romania. So I just went in there, and it's just, I don't know how you want to say it. I don't know if heavy is the right word, but it felt like heavy. Like you go there and it feels odd. So I'm just gonna read this section to you guys and see how it goes. Yes, in a tent on the side of the road. I rode a bike across all of I rode a bike from Amsterdam to Varna, Bulgaria, and stopped at all these places on the way. And I slept in a tent most of the time, so it was really cheap. But yeah. Located about a quarter-mile from the train station in Târgoviște, Romania, is a small but powerful museum. This is where the Ceausescu couple was tried and executed. After Romania's revolution against communism, I use the word museum loosely because there are really only 3 small rooms and an outdoor area, but this is one of the most powerful museums that a person can possibly go to. While there are no explicit ghost stories surrounding this museum, it is hard to deny the presence that is felt while on the grounds of the Ceausescu's execution site. While walking to the door of the building, there are signs explaining the history of the events that happened surrounding the revolution in Romania and the last days of the Ceausescus. Once you enter the museum, there is an undeniable heaviness in the air and an eerie silence. Inside the building, the main room is a beautiful blue with white inner trim and golden outer trim. Directly to the left of the entrance door, there is a worker to collect a very small fee, and directly to the right of the main door is the entrance to Colonel Andrei I don't speak Romanian, sorry, Kemenini's office, which was used as a medical examination room for the Ceausescu couple before the trial. Ahead of the front door is the documents and paperwork office that was used as the room for the trial by the Exceptional Military Court. Down the only hall that is open to the public, there is the Chief of Staff's office. That was where the Ceausescu couple was housed for their last 4 days and 3 nights. The juxtaposition of the absolute luxury that the Ceausescu couple had enjoyed in Bucharest and the peasant-like conditions that they experienced in their last days was a really powerful sight to behold. The outside area on the backside of the building is by far the most haunting place in the museum. Possibly the legitimately haunted part of the museum as well. A short walk from the door leading outside is the execution site of the Ceausescus. A small section of the wall is noticeably different from the rest due to the chunks that have been blown out by projectiles fired from AK-47s. The defined holes beyond the missing chunks of wall where the fatal volleys finally came to rest give insight into the chaos the Ceausescus experienced in their final moments. On the concrete walkway in front of the wall, there are also sections that have been pulverized by machine gun fire. Also, there are chalk outlines where the Ceausescu's bodies fell after 90 of the powerful 7.62 by 39mm rounds fired from the fully automatic AK-47s ripped through them, bringing their reign to an end. The other oddity about this event is that this happened on Christmas Day in 1989 on live TV. So in Romania on Christmas Day 1989, they took the president and his wife outside and shot them to death on live TV. Like I don't know why it seems so like baffling to me, but it's like I can't imagine that happening in like America or the UK. Like I can't imagine them being like, oh, the queen did something wrong. Yeah, we're gonna take her out. Stand up against this wall. Get ready. Like that's, and it's, but yeah, that's what they did. And I guess all the major cities shut down for like 3 days after that, and they had a huge party. It was rather wild. But no, this region of Eastern Europe is not scary. Hostel is a very inaccurate version of how it is. Especially in the Czech Republic and Romania, I would be riding and I would stop to set up my tent, and people would come out of their house and they would see me setting up a tent and they'd be like, no, you can't stay here. And I'm like, well, why not? Like it's just the middle, it's a field. Like, why can't I stay here? And they're like, because we have extra room in our house. You stay with us. And they bring somebody who's foreign and just let you stay in their house. And it was, yeah, something bad probably could have happened to me. Like, I'm totally at their mercy at this point. But no, everyone was lovely. It's well, like I would not hesitate to do it again. I would recommend it to female family members. Like, it's well worth it. It's a good time. So just don't, I don't know, just stay out of the gypsy areas and you'll be all right. But there's a lot of cool stuff to see, and it's Eastern Europe, especially like because most of us are Americans in this chat right now. Eastern Europe is probably my favorite place to go vacation wise, because once you get east of Germany, whether it's Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, you can get a really, really, really nice hotel for $30 to $40 a night, and you get a really good meal for probably 5, 6. I think outside of Prague, and as long as you're not in the major cities, if you're outside of the major cities, I don't think I paid more than $1 for a pint of beer at a restaurant. Like, it's stupid cheap. So if you want a nice vacation but you don't have a lot of money, that's how you do it. So, all right. So the last little story here is the Chiajna Monastery, which is outside of Bucharest, Romania, and this place is supposed to be haunted. Sadly, it's gated off. I tried to bribe the monk that was there, but he wouldn't. I mean, obviously, as a religious man, he wasn't really trying to take money in exchange for anything. So, there's also a video about this place on the channel as well. The Chiajna Monastery lies on the western outskirts of Bucharest, Romania. While the claims of hauntings are yet to be proven, the assertion that the Chiajna Monastery is cursed is demonstrable when looking at the history of the building. Constructed in the late 1700s, the Chiajna Monastery was a massive undertaking for the period, with its height nearing 60 feet and a length of 142 feet, with walls that are 3 to 6 foot thick. The level of strength and security that the monastery was supposed to provide for its faithful congregation was also the catalyst for the monastery's downfall. Given the fortress-like appearance of the Chiajna Monastery, the Ottoman Turks mistook the house of worship for a military building and besieged the monastery before the building and grounds were properly consecrated. Sadly, for history buffs, the Turks destroyed all of the documents contained within the monastery, and after the chaos of the Ottomans, the faithful Romanians began to try and restore the monastery. However, their troubles were not over. Shortly after the Chiajna Monastery was being rebuilt, after being attacked by the Turks, death was again coming to the cursed monastery. This time, death came in the form of plague. Prince Karagia came from Constantinople to rule over Wallachia in late 1812, and shortly after his arrival, cases of bubonic plague began popping up. Come June 1813, over 100,000 people countrywide had succumbed to the plague, and around 300 people per day were dying in the capital of Bucharest. With the daily sense of dread that was felt among the Romanian population, the restoration efforts of the Chiajna Monastery came to a halt. At this point, all hope was lost, and construction in the Chiajna Monastery never resumed. The mystery surrounding the Chiajna Monastery doesn't end with plagues and invaders. This is where it begins. Around the time of the official abandonment of the Chiajna Monastery, the monastery's bell was thrown into the Damjobita River. Local folks claim that they can hear the bells toll on nights when the moon is full, and on the feast day of the Chiajna Monastery's patron saint, John Jacob the Hosevitz. Some weird word that I can't figure out. The fires caused by the Ottoman Turks and the subsequent deterioration of the Chiajna Monastery have formed into an auspicious sign that is often referred to as the Romanian Sphinx. Located in the middle of the right wall, just inside the entrance of the monastery, plaster has become detached and formed into the shape of this Romanian Sphinx. This is called the Romanian Sphinx because of its uncanny resemblance to the Sphinx in Egypt. Others claim this figure is that of an angel or the Lady of Chiajna. Modern-day mysteries of the Chiajna are the numerous disappearances from the surrounding Gulești neighborhood, murders on the monastery grounds which have gone unsolved, and living shadows. When walking in the Gulești neighborhood, especially at the cemetery gates, the Chiajna Monastery can be seen looming over the neighborhood. It is almost as if the monastery is exerting a supernatural force or draw upon the residents and visitors in the area. Many people report massive, dynamic shadows on the walls of the monastery. These shadows move independently of anything else. These shadows move independently of anything between the monastery and the sunlight. There are 2 recorded unsolved murders that took place on the Chiajna Monastery grounds around 1990 that are rumored to be the result of paranormal forces that rule over the cursed monastery. Ultimately, the Chiajna Monastery is a place of significant mystery and legend. While it may be hard to prove the paranormal claims, it is hard to dispute the claims of this being a cursed monastery. Given the history of the Chiajna Monastery, it is one of the most bizarre cases that I've ever explored in Romania, and it is worth a visit if you're ever in Bucharest. Just go during normal operating hours, lest you become the next case of paranormal murder or disappearance on the grounds of the Chiajna Monastery. Oh. More people are coming up. Oh, it's lovely to see you all. So yes, this is all that I have for episode 0. Hopefully, I'm going to be working with Miss Cooper next week to sort out some of the technical issues that we had and hopefully get her on here so it's more than just me talking to a microphone and looking at a screen. A little back and forth would be nice. And we'll get some more stuff sorted out. It'll be a little bit more polished, a little more professional. So, yeah, it's lovely to see you all in the chat. It might only be 5 viewers, but it's 5 more than I was expecting. So, thank you all very much. And I will see you guys next week.